Hey guys, it is Wednesday, January 14th, 2015, and as you can tell, I've made a little bit of changes around here. For the new year, that I changed things around. I moved my furniture around in my dorm room, all four pieces of it, which is why you're seeing my table in the background instead of my bed. And I also decided, in order to make these videos go along a little smoother, that I would start taking notes for all the comics that I read. So I'll be referencing these, hopefully getting less ums and uhs and repeating myself and getting stuck on these videos. Not a full script, but should be able to move these videos along, hopefully get them under half an hour each instead of over. So yeah, let's get started, not waste any more time. First book this week is a book I didn't even pre-order. I didn't know it was coming out until I saw it in the store, but I'm excited that I did see it because it is an Adventure Time miniseries focusing on Marceline the Vampire Queen, who I've mentioned before on these reviews, is my favorite character on the show, which is hard because they're all pretty much my favorite, but she's still number one. Um, so as a number one, not quite sure how to exactly, you know, really not enough to go off in terms of is it good or not, but it's a pretty good start. Starts with Marceline trying to write new songs and kind of getting writer's block. They actually say this about music a lot, is that the reason a band's first album is usually one of their best, in the case that they are, is because the songwriters have had their entire lives to write their first album, and then they only have 2 years to write the second. And that's what Marceline is kind of struggling with in this beginning bit over here, it seems. And as you can tell from the art style, it's different than the main Adventure Time book. I think the soft lighting and colors kind of gives the whole book more of a kind of claymation sort of feel. Everyone looks kind of like they're made out of bubblegum. Well, more so than Princess Bubblegum, who's always made out of bubblegum, but she even looks more bubblegummy, I guess. Anyway, and the plot is basically Marceline struggling to come up with new songs when suddenly she's struck by this weird lightning thing that sends her flying around the Candy Kingdom, causing quite a ruckus, causing a mess. And in order to stop Marceline, Princess Bubblegum sees no other solution than to trap her in this orb over here and then launch her into space. And that's pretty much where it ends, with Marceline flying off into space, trapped in this little thing. So it's a pretty short, not a lot of plot to this book. It's just Marceline's frustrated, cut to Princess Bubblegum, the two match. Marceline gets shot off into space. But from what I get of it, I mean, it's an interesting setup. In the beginning, she asks, I need more inspiration, I need more ideas, and then it seems like she's going to get them. I also really like the cover, too. I didn't mention that, I don't think. But maybe it's just because Jake is voiced by Joe or John DiMaggio, I forget which one, who was also Bender in Adventure Time, but this setup is already kind of reminding me of who's also in Futurama, sorry. But the episode is, this comic is already reminding me of the episode of Futurama where Bender, DiMaggio's character, was launched into deep space and eventually met God. It's a fun show. If you haven't seen Futurama, I definitely recommend it. And if you like the Adventure Time comic, and if you like Marceline especially, probably pick this up. It'll probably be very good. At least it hasn't gotten off to a bad start. Next up, another issue number one. We have Conan and Red Sonja. Conan and Red Sonja. I don't know if I said it right. I said it right at the first. I don't know. I repeated myself. Anyway, issue one, written by Gail Simone, this person drawn by these two people, I guess. I don't know the exact split of the work here, but I've been picking it up because if you've been watching these, you know that I've been following Gail Simone's Red Sonja run, and she's been hyping this up. So I thought I'd give it a try. and I really liked it. What I read. I'm going to be upfront. I don't know anything about Conan the Barbarian really at all. I just know that he's Conan the Barbarian, and he had a movie where he was played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, and that's pretty much it. Um, but this book I felt like a really good introduction to the character because they set up this great dichotomy between him and Red Sonja, who I am more familiar with because I've been reading the Gail Simone run. And just one thing I want to note, kind of, it's a bit of an early spoiler, but it's in issue 1, so it's hard to really spoil anything. But one thing I really enjoyed just right off the bat reading the, well, not right off the bat because I had to finish it and then go back, but there's this really cool kind of mirror between the very first page of the story in this book and then the last page of the story of this book. And as I finished this book, I was like, oh, this looks very familiar. I wonder why. And it's the same thing, only different. Anywho, as I was saying, the book very quickly sets up a really good dichotomy between Conan and Sonja that I printed myself. That helps, I think, new readers really get a feel for who these characters are in relation to each other. So the book begins with Sonja being more stealthy and infiltrating this castle as she's watching this Colosseum fight, this animal fight. And we see her talking to someone and then flirting with them pretty much. Like, it's a weird sort of master-slave flirting sort of dealio, not really flirting, too many power dynamics there. But so she sneaks her way into the inner castle in order to steal something, by kind of using her wits. I mean, she's still Red Sonja, so she still ends up with a sword in her hand, but she gets basically through the front door sneakily. And then we see Conan, who basically just hops over the gate and conks people on the head. And then we see them meet. And yeah, as you can also tell from the art, it's appropriately rough, I think, for the story, considering it's these two kind of barbarian characters, these two, really down-to-earth fighter characters. I think the art is very appropriate. It's not polished. It's not like shiny and sheen. It's this very kind of rough and very line-heavy art, which I think fits, and I personally like the style. The book also has the decency, I feel, to get the infighting between the two over with pretty much within this first issue. So you have this really good splash page here, for one. And they pretty much just get the infighting within a couple of pages, and then they're done. Then it's like, they pretty much settled that, and of course that's something you always get with these crossovers is I want to see the two fight, even though they never really do. So I'm glad that they just kind of got it over with, Gail Simone and the other writer, Jim Zub, I presume, or it could be Dan, it could be any of these people, but I'm glad they had the courtesy to just get it over with in this first issue. And then they immediately move to flirting. So by the end here, you have them flirting. And something I picked up on and really enjoyed here is the very subtle facial expressions you have through this book. As I said, the art was rough, but the facial expressions are really, really well done. So in this panel here, you have this guy talking to both of them, and you can see their eyes, they're looking at each other, they're smirking. And then next page, immediately, Sonja has the blade to this guy's neck. So they were obviously planning something. And then in just these two panels over here, you have the very subtle kind of flirting that matches the dialogue really well. And it's all in the face. It's not animation, but it's all facial illustration is the word I was looking for. And it's very well done. As for the story, it involves magic seeds that become evil plants. Hard to tell where it's going exactly, but it is told as a legend. The narration is some guy telling a prince the story of how Conan and Sonja made their name and were feared and all that, which seems in line with the whole Conan Red Sonja mythos of them being these epic legends. So can't fault it for that. And really good first issue. Did a lot of things well. Did a lot of things really quickly. Set up a lot. So if you're familiar with one character, the other character, neither character, I'd still recommend it. It's still shaping up to be pretty good. Next up, flipping pages in the notes. We have Silver Surfer, number 8, start of a new arc. I believe the last issue was another single issue, one hitter. I forget what they're called. One shot is what they're called. So it was another one of those that I really liked. I've really been liking Silver Surfer, and I'm not going to comment too much on the art. It's the same team that it has been from the beginning, and it's art that I have always enjoyed. Always very animated looking and cartoony, and just very saturated colors, very bright colors, stuff that I enjoy. And the plot of this new arc concerns a planet called New Haven. Was it New Haven? It was, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, New Haven. Like New Haven, Connecticut, where Dawn is originally from. Connecticut, I believe. Massachusetts. Is New Haven in Massachusetts? There's a town in the Northeast called New Haven. I think it's Connecticut. It might be Massachusetts. I'm terrible at this whole geography thing. Anywho, so it involves this planet called New Haven, where refugees from all of the planets that Galactus has eaten have come and gathered together to start a new civilization. And the Surfer and Dawn accidentally stumble upon this planet, and predictably enough, they're not fans of the Surfer because he was Galactus' herald and brought Galactus to many of the planets that they ended up becoming refugees of. So of course, they land on this planet. Dawn finds out about the terrible things that Norrin Radd has done in the past, and pretty much breaks up with him. I mean, the book has been kind of this romantic thing. It's not exact. I don't know. It's hard to tell if it's more companionship or kind of more like a romance. They've been playing it back and forth. But it feels like a breakup in the book when they decide to part ways because Dawn can't forgive Norrin after learning about what he did in the past, which is completely understandable. Both characters are like, they understand it. Norrin doesn't try to fight back. And that's really where we leave off in this first issue, with Dawn on this planet now, with all these alien refugees, Norrin Radd, Silver Surfer being all mopey because his girlfriend just broke up with him, essentially. And then you have Galactus at the very end, which is bringing in a part of the Silver Surfer mythos, that pretty big part of his mythos that hasn't been in these books yet. So I guess Dan Slott just decided, no, it's about time, and it's hard to fault him for it. So there you are. Good place to hop on a very good book that I've been enjoying for quite a while. Next up, we have Captain Marvel. It's a very, very late Christmas issue. To put this in a couple words, or a few words rather. Very late Christmas issue. It is part 2 of the Christmas Carol book that was released last month in December. It's a shame they couldn't time it, so this came out during Christmas, but just because it's mistimed does not make it a bad story. It is a very simple story, though. It's not complicated. It's a 2-parter. They didn't have enough time to really develop it. And the last part, the first part, was very self-contained, and so is this part. Anyway, first thing that really popped out to me about this book is that Carol Danvers recognizes the great holiday of Festivus, which is the one I personally celebrate in the season. So thank you, Kelly Sue, for recognizing an oft-forgotten holiday. And then there's another great panel. So Carol Danvers is back in Manhattan for Christmas. She decides to visit a friend in the hospital when she is kidnapped by the villain from the last issue, Grace Valentine. I know because her name is right on the page where she appears in the first thing. It's really convenient. So Carol Danvers is kidnapped by these people on Christmas, and then she escapes. I don't think that's really any spoilers there. She escapes. It's a really cool looking escape. And then she has the best line in the book. Probably the best line of this week in comics. Valentine says to Carol, "Don't get too comfortable on your feet, princess." And then, yeah, I just love this line. She responds, "That's Captain Princess," or just Captain Princess, I guess. Great line. I love it. I thought it was really fun. And I just like the face and everything. Just, great panel. Great panel. And then, in the spirit of Christmas, Captain Marvel ends up meeting Santa Claus. And then that's pretty much it's pretty much a Deus Ex Machina past this point. Santa Claus helps Captain Marvel escape and find some bombs that were planted around the city. And she goes around in the Santa outfit. And then there's fireworks at the end for her friend in the hospital. And it's all very nice. Like I said, very simple, very self-contained, not a lot of big, interesting plot stuff happening, but it's still a very enjoyable book. I enjoyed reading it. There were these fun moments that I pointed out. There were more that I didn't. Nothing special, nothing worth hopping on the book for, but would have made a really good Christmas gift. Just very enjoyable kind of fluff, very holiday appropriate, I think. And it's just a shame it really didn't come out on time. What else do we have here? I forget which way I've been flipping this book because I've been writing in it backwards. Anywho, yes. Next book on the list for this week is Ultimate Spider-Man. Again, continuing from the arc started in the last issue, where Miles Morales' father was telling Miles of his history, of the past, basically. And so we're continuing that story of how Miles' father met Ultimate Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin. Very cool page over here, I think. And almost became an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. So we're just kind of continuing that story. The whole book isn't like this, isn't in this portrait layout, but enough of these pages are, and they're very well illustrated pages, I think. I'm going to show a bit of them off. So yeah, Jefferson Davis. I still love that he's called Jefferson Davis, especially because of something else that happens in the book that I'll get to a little bit later. Basically joins the Kingpin's gang, begins working for the Kingpin, and along the way, the Kingpin decides to buy a drug from Toad that gives people mutant powers temporarily. When Toad reveals that, is it Toad or Frog? It's Toad, right? It is Toad, yeah. But when Toad reveals that the drug is made by basically splicing mutant genes like off a live mutant, basically like keeping them hostage, and the trade is that Wilson Fisk is essentially buying this mutant. Jefferson Davis, as a black man, gets really offended by his employer buying and selling human beings. This is really fitting, I think, considering his name is Jefferson Davis, who I mentioned last time I reviewed this book, was the president of the Confederacy in the United States during the Civil War. So you have that kind of thing, and this is a very kind of blaxploitation-esque story, the one that he's telling. At least the vibe I'm getting for it, it's very blaxploitation. So it's really cool that they're basically bringing that in. This whole, since Miles Morales was made Spider-Man, a lot of attention has been been towards him being half black, and I think this is a very good way to naturally integrate that into a story, that there are these issues that are still heavily kind of based in race and race politics, and this is race politics versus crime politics and all that. I just thought it was like a really neat thing to do in this book. I really enjoyed how that came up, and it came up like really naturally, and they're not forcing it, it's not like they're edging it in, they're not making it about race, but they are addressing this issue in a way that's, I thought, just very, very well done, very thought-provoking. because they're making a blaxploitation, and that was my phone, and I thought it was a bee, and I'm allergic, and I just got scared. Sorry about that. That was really freaky. So yeah, by the end, it's revealed that the father didn't. I don't know. Wait, it wouldn't even be a bee. It's not bee season. Bee season is spring, and it's the middle of winter. Anywho, still bees freak me out. Anywho, yeah, it's a nice kind of father-son story. The two have a very strained relationship, and this is them kind of talking it over, forgiving each other, moving on, which I enjoy. I enjoy those sweet sort of stories. I'm a sucker. I've admitted this before in these videos, so I enjoyed it. And as just a two kind of issue story of the father's memories, it's a distraction from the main story. It doesn't have much to do with Spider-Man. And even by the end, they kind of admit that he's just telling the story to get it off his chest and to explain himself to Miles. But it's still a very well done story, and I still enjoyed reading it. Probably not the best issues to jump in on, but still very good in their own right. The next book is Spider-Verse. Issue 2. This is the big crossover book for me in series book. And so yeah, a lot to say about this because it contains 5 stories. So I'm going to give a little bit on each one. The first one, luckily, is only 1 page long, and despite that, is probably my favorite in the in this book, just because it's the Spider-Man from Marvel vs. Capcom, and I like that's one. It's hard to think like, oh yeah, they put that one in there. It's one of those you forget about. It's like, oh my god, yeah, that is what would be an alternate dimension Spider-Man from Marvel vs. Capcom. It's just a 1 page story, but I think just the novelty of it, and that's one of the main appeals to Spider-Verse overall, is the novelty of the whole thing, and I think it's cool that they included that one. The next story we have, and I think, again, another very clever tie-in to something that you wouldn't normally think of as that could be part of the Spider-Man mythos, is Anansi. Not a Nazi. Anansi. If you don't know, Anansi is an African myth. He's an old African god of kind of tricks and storytelling, who also happens to be a spider. So of course they're gonna make him a spider token in the book and have basically an Anansi myth in the middle of this comic book. And the way they do it, I think, and I haven't read many Anansi stories. I read a couple of I don't know if they're stories or fables or legends or myths or I don't know how I'm supposed to talk about them. But I read a few of the Anansi stories just through my life, in school, outside of school, just because mythology's cool, you know? And from what I read, this short little comic feels very true to the way that the Nazi stories are told, where you have a Nazi getting in trouble and then manipulating events around him by telling stories in order to get himself out of trouble. And yeah, it's just this very fun story that you wouldn't really expect to find in a Spider-Man comic book, but it's still very appropriate. They make it a very appropriate story, and I think it's really cool how. And of course, you have Spider-Man, who is this character who does use his wits a lot more than kind of a lot of other superheroes. He's known for his fast mouth and getting himself out of trouble with a smart mouth. And you have a Nazi who's a very similar character who also happens to be a spider. I just think it's such a clever idea, and they pulled it off very well. And the art, again, I just like how the art is so varied in these books from page to page. And we'll get to that, of course, in the next book, which I think has the most striking art of this little collection here. The next one is Punk Rock Spidey, which is a Spider-Man I've been very excited to get more of. And so you have this punk rock Spider-Man. It really just like punches you in the face with its stylization. Like right up front, you get a lot of kind of Sex Pistols, The Clash. It's more UK punk aesthetic, I think, than New York punk aesthetic, um, which is kind of weird considering this takes place in New York City. I like how they basically have it's Norman Osborn, but they make him Ronald Reagan, which is great. Of course, punk very tied to 80s, very tied to Reagan, especially in Britain. Well, in Britain it wasn't tied to Reagan. In Britain it was tied to anywho, it was tied to Margaret Thatcher. But it's really cool how they do that sort of thing. They also have an in-joke, just the art. I'm a huge punk fan, so again, pulling right at my heartstrings here. They even have a joke regarding the famous 3 chords of punk. I forget which magazine it was, but it was this ad in the back of this magazine that said, buy guitar, learn 3 chords. Like, here's 3 chords, and it illustrated how to play 3 chords on a guitar. Now start a band. And so that's kind of become, I guess, like a meme of the punk subculture is 3 chords, start a band. Maybe a mantra, I don't know. And then another really cool thing they do, and something that I think isn't regarded enough in punk culture, or at least referenced enough in punk culture, even though it's a huge part, is they make punk Spider-Man black. And that's just, I think, really cool, because like the punk subculture, and then you have the black kind of post-civil rights, still looking to find their own enfranchisement and stuff. A lot of early punk rockers who kind of got erased from history were black. I think the most famous of which now were the Dead Kennedys. And even then, you don't really hear about the Dead Kennedys that often, but really early punk bands, and black, yeah. So I think it's really cool how they gave him this, gave Punk Spider-Man, they made him black. They made him this kind of quintessential punk thing. And I don't want to get into the politics of punk and of just like the politics of kind of oppositional speech. But yeah, I just generally think it's really cool and really important that they made the Punk Spider-Man black, and so I really appreciate that. Yeah, and this has been, I guess, one of my more political videos, hasn't it? The next Spider-Verse story is Mexican Spider-Man, and I will be the first to admit I do not know Spanish, so I couldn't really read any of this. They offer a free English version digitally, but I haven't read it yet, and I probably won't. But I still, from what I picked up of this story of the book, it's basically this Mexican Spider-Man taking down some kind of simple crime stuff and then going over his origin. And I think he has a really interesting origin. I mean, it's very similar to the regular Spider-Man stuff, except this time his father was a luchador, and that's where he gets his mask and costume from. And I really do love this Spider-Man's costume. I think it's great. As you can tell, it has kind of the luchador influence with the bright colors and all that, but it still looks very distinctively Spider-Man. I just think it's a neat costume, and because I couldn't actually read this story, that's pretty much all I got from it. And the last story in this book seems to take place near the end of the entire Spider-Verse tale. Just from the narration here, it takes place, they're storming Loom World. And it basically considers 2 Spider-Men having a small chat in the middle of this battle. And where they discover, they're trying to figure out what makes them different. Because they're both Peter Parker, they both seem to have lived the same experiences. And they're just pretty much talking for 2 pages. Well, what makes us different? How are we different Spider-Men? And I don't want to spoil this one, but needless to say, it's a very sweet story. Very subtle at the differences. They do reveal it. It's kind of subtle. I had to look over it twice to figure out and realize, oh, that's what it is. And then from that subtle difference, it made me think, oh my God, does this mean this, and this? Within Spider-Man and how it's going to continue post-Spider-Verse. So if you pick it up, if you notice what it is, please like chat in the comments about it. I'm fine talking about it in the comments because I think it's really interesting what Dan Slott might be doing there with that little tease. Next up, we got Superman and Wonder Woman, issue 15. Probably not going to talk much about this one. We start off with Magog's kind of origin story. He's a kid who's pissed off Superman and Wonder Woman didn't save his parents, and then he gets kidnapped by that witch. From the last book, we find out what is Circe, who I'm pretty sure I forgot her name before. I was like, oh, she's that witch who's a Wonder Woman villain, but Circe, I know her name now. And I didn't quite like this issue as much as the last one because they kind of go back on Wonder Woman's character and make her a hypocrite again. There's one panel in particular where they have they make Wonder Woman. I get Wonder Woman is supposed to be the warrior, but here it is. Here's the panel. So if you're reading that for yourself, I can't read it because it's in reverse on that camera, but it says, you know I care about everyone, but as much as we try to dance around it, I am the god of war. And that doesn't sound like Diana struggling against the two parts of her character. It just sounds like her making excuses to be more ruthless, or rather the writers making excuses for her to act, in my opinion, out of character, while still maintaining that, yeah, no, this is totally Wonder Woman. So yeah, it's like she cares about everyone, but is still willing to kill and be reckless. I just don't like that characterization of Wonder Woman. I don't like how, especially how they're trying to play it as part of just like her character struggles, because it does sound more like excuses than actual like struggling and wondering what is right, what should I do. And besides that, you kind of a fight scene between Superman, Wonder Woman, and Magog, where Wonder Woman is all brutal and punchy, and Superman's like, no, wait, you're putting all these people in danger recklessly. And then Circe shows up at the very end. So, yeah, not much to talk about there. Moving on to Future's End, number 37. And in this book, they really kind of go back to the storytelling where they have 5 stories in a single book, but they don't flesh out each one enough to really make it count. This feels like a series of kind of teaser trailers for a story. So in this beginning part with Constantine, you basically have him say, we have to take Frankenstein back to Castle Frankenstein, and then it ends. Like, that's the whole big thing of this. He has a chat that goes on way too long with Amethyst, and then we got to take Frankenstein back to the castle, and then it ends. And then we have Firestorm, who's trying to like separate themselves again by building a transporter, and it doesn't work. You have the Justice League fighting Dr. Polaris again, and then it ends. That scene kind of ends mid-fight to go back to Firestorm where the teleporter doesn't work. You have you're catching up with 50 Sue and all those people, and it ends up with basically people disappearing. It's the most fleshed out of these stories here, but again, it ends with basically 50 Sue teleporting away with the safe, and we don't know anything else. Then you have a page each of what's going on with Mr. Terrific and Superman. Not really enough to go on there. Like it feels just like a waste of space. And then you have a little bit with Batman Beyond reconnecting with Tim Drake, and then the Joker Batman robot shows up, and that's the end of the book. So they're going back to that style of things where everything feels too rushed and they're squeezing too much in this book and not getting enough out of each story, which I thought they were out of, and I kind of wish that they were out of, but yeah, that's basically that. So moving on to Grayson number 6, really good cover, I think, here. And again, starting off as Grayson has been doing recently, starting off in the middle of a spiral mission, just jumping in, both feet on the ground, and Helen and Dick begin by investigating this laboratory where they're trying to pick up another magic organ, when they find out that it's already been taken. We find out a little history of Spiral and get a little backstory of Mr. Minus, or Mr. Minos, who's the director of Spiral. So we get a little tease about his backstory and just fleshing him out, making him potentially more interesting, which is enjoyable considering he's been a huge mystery so far. Before this, this book has a couple of really great moments, I think. So we have Knight, what's his name? Why am I so bad at all of these things? We have Midnighter recognizing Dick Grayson via his butt. Of course, Dick Grayson has the best ass in comic books. This is a known fact, so I'm glad they're finally. I'm glad they made something of that. And again, you can't read the text. There it is. But I recognize that ass. I know that ass anywhere. Just a great comedic moment in the beginning of this book. Just Dick Grayson ID'd by ass. And so you have Midnighter kidnapping Dick Grayson while they're in the middle of this investigation over here, and they get into a fight. And they get into one of those fights where they talk about how blah 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 kind of philosophy stuff. And Dick has this great moment. Midnighter is basically saying, "I know who you are, Dick Grayson. I know you were Nightwing. I've studied all your moves. There's no way you can win." When Dick Grayson suddenly changes styles on him, he changes from fighting like Nightwing to fighting like Robin. And it's one of those kind of small things that show just how resourceful Dick Grayson is as a character and why he's why he's the first Robin, why he's the best Robin, because he can switch like that. He's always paying attention. He's just as adaptive as Batman, basically. He's prepared. He has these 2-3 styles that he can just switch between and keep enemies on their toes. Just some really cool stuff, I think. Then we have this, and then in the last couple pages of this book, it gets stupid. I don't want to say stupid, but the book has been kind of, it hasn't really been comic booky. It's been more of a spy thriller since in the first 5 issues, 6 issues, 7 issues, considering the Futures End tie-in and the annual. So it's been kind of very grounded and spy thrillery compared to comic booky. And then you have this panel over here where Nightwing declares, the line's lighting off, where Nightwing says, I became a Spider-Man? Yeah, I gave that up to become a Spider-Man. I was like, wait, what? Spider-Man? And I know they meant that it's explained on the book why he says Spider-Man, but just that they're putting the words Spider and Man next to each other in a comic book and not bringing up the Marvel character. I don't know, it seems like a wasted opportunity. And then this very grounded book, this book that seems to have just been kind of pure spy thriller, ends with Dick Grayson in space helping a millenniums-old woman with a garden in space. So within the span of basically 2 pages, this book goes from kind of, I'm not going to say good to bad, but it goes from this kind of serious, more grounded sort of story to suddenly Dick Grayson in space. Gets very comic booky at the end, and not sure how I feel about that. I think these writers have proven themselves competent enough to take that idea and make it not dumb, but it's still such a great shift in scale and focus in such a short amount of time. It's just very jarring, is all I have to say. But again, a good issue by itself up to that point, with a couple funny moments, couple good moments in it. Next book we have is Batgirl, issue 38. And speaking of Dick Grayson declaring himself Spider-Man, in the last book, this one actually reminds me a lot of early Spider-Man. Basically, this in the last issue, Batgirl made herself a whole bunch of kind of social media pages. She made herself a whatever DC is calling Instagram. And so we open up with a whole bunch of kind of social media posts about Batgirl now that she's in Burnside and made herself public. So she's become kind of this public superhero who's in the news. And then her friends don't really like it. So we have her go to a concert as Batgirl. Or go to a club as Batgirl, where Black Canary runs into her and says, "I'm tired of you, you're just hogging the spotlight, you shouldn't be doing this, you're going to piss people off, it's a bad idea." And then at the very here, you have what just struck me as a recreation of that really famous Spider-Man cover. I think it's Spider-Man issue 50, where you have Peter Parker walking out of the alley, and you have the Spider-Man costume in a garbage can over here. Spidey No More, I think, is the title of the story. And so you have like that, which is like a really mini recreation of that cover, one of the most famous covers in comic books, I think. I don't think that's completely unintentional. And then you have, like, you basically switch right from that to Barbara Gordon on a date with the cop that she met, I think it was also last issue, the cop that she was flirting with. And so now they're dating, and the cop on their date reveals that he's not a fan of Batgirl and thinks that she's just a costume vigilante and a menace who's up to no good, which again mirrors early Spider-Man stories of Aunt May not liking Spider-Man, or his friends not trusting Spider-Man, or J. Jonah Jameson having it out for Spider-Man. And of course, now that you also have Batgirl being a very public face instead of a private one, and her being on social media, you have things like social media by the end of this book. Social media's opinion of Batgirl has changed. Now they all don't like her anymore. And you have Barbara Gordon, who's still a student, struggling, balancing being Batgirl and being a student. So she's sleeping through classes and not getting her work done. And the whole thing just, yeah, reminds me of kind of the essential Spider-Man early story mythos. What did I write here? Yeah. What's this one? Okay. Yeah, sorry. My handwriting is atrocious and I can't read it sometimes myself. But yeah, you have just these essential kind of Spider-Man elements in a Batgirl story, where you have her dealing with celebrity versus heroism, with her friends not liking the one persona, but, you know, the friends not liking the hero persona, the dates not liking the hero persona, but her, you know, still having to do it and balance that and school and everything like that. So, as you probably tell, I'm a huge Spider-Man fan. I'm not opposed to those sorts of stories, and I think it's interesting that not only are you switching it from Spider-Man to Batgirl, but you do have this shift between... Oh, and they're both like these really smart, nerdy characters, of course, too. But that you have the shift from kind of traditional media, like newspapers, saying Spider-Man is a menace, where the people are like, no, he's a hero, to social media, which are, you know, the people saying, oh, this Batgirl, you know, just opinions fluctuating everywhere and everything turning on her this way or that way. So you have, it's like the people's opinions directly saying, no, like, we don't want Batgirl here, or yes, we want Batgirl here. And then I think, yeah, eventually gender will play an issue into it too. Media expectations of men and media expectations of women are very different. And so I want to see how they play around with that if they decide to in the future of this book at all too. And then this video has gone on long, even with the notes, but I hope it's been a better video because of them. Please tell me that. And last issue of the week is Batman Eternal, issue 41. And opposed to Future's End, they've kind of switched back to their normal positions in terms of whether I like them or not. this issue deals mainly with just one story, and that is the story of Red Robin, Red Hood, Batgirl, and what's her name, and Harper Row trying to find out about the nanobots that infected Harper Row's brother, and then led them to all these kids and that sort of thing. So they're following up on that investigation, where they run into the Mad Hatter and then get into a fight with the Mad Hatter. So as you can tell, the art very different from what Batman Eternal has been, and frankly, I like it. It reminds me a lot of kind of the DC animated universe look. It's mostly in terms of the shading and coloring more than the line work, but I just get a very Bruce Timm sort of vibe from this artwork, and I mean, that's the DC I grew up on. I grew up on the DC animated universe, and so anything that looks like the DC animated universe is okay in my book. So yeah, aside from the Batgirl, aside from the raid on the Mad Hatter thing, you have a short bit with you have a short little bit of Spoiler. We find out how Spoiler came to be kidnapped by Catwoman, essentially. It's like a 2-page little interruption in the main story. Not that bothersome, and it ends in a way that feels like an end instead of a tease, which I appreciate. Especially with us knowing where this goes, because we got that little preview issue in Batman 28, I think it was, a while ago. So yeah, you have this main story of this raid on the Mad Hatter's factory. The Mad Hatter ends up brainwashing Red Hood, Batgirl, and Red Robin, which leads Harper Row to finally put on the Bluebird costume by the end of this book. So yeah, very, very tight book overall, a very tight issue in this weekly series. And what I enjoyed, basically putting Batman Eternal back into top form that it has exhibited before. And again, I just love the art style. I just can't really take any points off of that. I have to add points even. I mean, if I had numbers and actually gave these a numerical point things. Anyway, I'm saying I really liked the art, and that the narrative, the words seem to have matched the quality in this issue. So that is it for this week. I know I said I hoped that these videos would be shorter, but I mean, that is what, 11 books that I reviewed today, so 4 minutes or so a book, not that bad, I don't think. And yeah, so I really like this note system. If you have any recommendations for how to make these videos shorter or just better overall, again, please message me comments. If you like this video, please rate it, subscribe if you feel like listening to more of me talk about comic books every week. And I really hope you do, because I enjoy doing them, and I do hope to see you next week with some more comics. Thanks for watching.